Namaste, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. So happy to be here with you all. I am so grateful for every single one of you. I'm finally getting up and really on fire about this year, 2019. I had a really beautiful, nourishing, slow holiday season, and I hope you guys had a great holiday season. And I'm super inspired about everything that's coming this year and reconnecting with all of you. So first of all, I just want to really send blessings for your 2019. I also would love to hear those of you that are jumping on whenever you watch this. Put in the comments what your number one, I don't even love to use the word resolution, but your number one sankalpa or intention is for this year. Of course, we've all been reading a lot about intentions and resolutions and goal setting, and this is a time of year when everybody gets really inspired by that, which is so amazing. But I think from the yoga perspective, one thing that I've really been reflecting on in this season is looking back on my 2018 and noticing the ebb and flow, the nature of my career and my work, which is the ebb and flow. So I want to just start by giving you permission to be in both phases of that. So some of you might be really surging forward and inspired and activated and charged up for the new year. Some of you may be a little more like me. I've just been taking it slow and really reflecting and reorganizing things and purging a lot of things. And now this week, the second week of the year, I feel really inspired to take action. So I want to hear from you all. What is the number one thing that you want to create this year? So put it in the comments below. I'll be commenting back. For me, I'm really integrating a much deeper balance of personal and professional life, spending a lot of time with my family. Some of you know my father was diagnosed with cancer and he's doing amazing, but that's really put a different spin on things and the preciousness of time and life and wanting to spend a lot of time with my family. So one of the things I'm most inspired about, and this is going to be a big theme for our work together this year, is helping you all create careers that you are mobile, you have time and money freedom. It's been a huge value of mine. It's what I've integrated into my life, and I feel really free, and I want to help you do that. So I'm going to have a lot of offerings that we're going to be talking about for that. Today is a very special interview I'm going to bring on in just a second. My very dear friend, soul sister, and student, Jennie Wise, and we're going to be talking to her because she has gone through our whole Yoga.Psyche.Soul live training. We are getting ready to announce the dates for the live training of 2019, and so Jennie's going to pop on and tell us what her experience was, and I want to hear what questions you guys have. So for anyone that's interested in doing a live training, I just want to be clear. This is a 300-hour advanced yoga psychology training. It's Yoga Alliance certified, but it's 6 modules that are spread out over the year from May to November, and you do not have to do all 6 modules in a row. Most people do all 6 modules in a row, and that's great, and it's nice because we have a big cohort of people that are going through it together. Some people, like Jennie will tell you, did a couple modules one year and a couple modules the next year, and that works really well because we want to make it really accessible for you. I know time, money are very, precious commodities, so it's not possible for everyone to go away for 6 weeks during the year and do a training. You can combine these modules individually, however you want. Once you complete all 6 modules, you will be eligible for that Yoga Alliance 300-hour certification. So with that being said, we are getting ready to announce the dates. My team has been putting all the finishing touches on this. I'm super excited. And I'm going to bring Jennie on because this is a really unique training. This is one of my biggest aims in this training is that it's a very deep personal development course. And myself as a psychotherapist, I love doing group therapy, so our afternoon sessions are diving very deeply into your own psychological journey. If you feel like this year you're ready for personal transformation, you're ready to take a look at maybe some of those habits, patterns, old wounds, emotional, wounds that you might have, this is what we do in this training. And the reason is you learn by living, and so we have to use our life as our curriculum and understand how to process things ourselves so that we can then help our students do the same. So Jennie, I am so grateful to welcome her on. And please put in the comments any questions that you guys have. Welcome, Jennie. Hi.
Hey. Hey, Ashley. Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
Namaste.
I know. Everyone put in the comments any questions you have, even if if you're watching this later. We want to hear your questions because then I'll go back and I'll be answering them as we go. So Jenny, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, what you do.
So I actually am here in Cary, North Carolina, which is outside of Raleigh, and I own a yoga, mindfulness, and meditation center, actually, and really excited to be integrating yoga psychology as much as I can and the principles that I've used and learned in this training into my teaching at the studio, and also helping people privately as well with their personal growth. So I would say that's a one takeaway that I can say has really affected my life is the personal growth that happens in this training.
Mm. What's the website of your studio or your personal website so you can put it up there for everybody?
Yeah, it's www.wisemindyoga.com.
Awesome. Okay, so everyone go check out Jenny's work, wisemindyoga.com. And how long have you been teaching?
I have been teaching now going on about 5 years, and it really has happened fast and furious as far as soon after I started yoga, I went into a 200 YTT program. And I did actually want to mention one other thing. Through going through your business of yoga, right, and learning that, we created a giveaway that is actually, it's wisemindfreebie.com. So like Wise Mind and then freebie, FREEBIE.com. So folks can go on there. It's just tips about mindfulness. So just FYI, learned it from you, Ashley.
WiseMindFreebie.com. So this is something that if any of you have been following me for any length of time know that I'm super passionate about helping wellness entrepreneurs, yoga teachers, therapists, whatever you are. We have a lot of people who aren't yoga teachers or therapists, but are coaches, nutrition coaches. But what I've found is fairly universal in this population is, and for many people, but challenge in really excelling as an entrepreneur and understanding how to get a strategy and be really crystal clear on what it is that you're doing. And so that's a big piece of this live training. The whole last module is a business, leadership, and productivity training. And I really kind of hammer it in, like we minimize a lot of commitments, get super clear on what your direction and intention is, and set your business up like that. So I'm so happy to hear that you got that up. Yay.
Yay. So one of the things I also thought would be helpful to talk about is that Carly suggested is how I decided to take the training.
Yeah.
So in my own personal life, right, they talk about in yoga, when you're ready, the teacher will arrive, right? The teacher will show up. And in my own personal journey, I was definitely having some issues with things that weren't working for me anymore, with some scars and behavior patterns, especially in my personal relationships, that weren't working for me anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I was seeking what my next step was in my healing process. And there was your Facebook ads that came up, and it just kept scrolling, kept showing up, and showed up in Los Angeles. And I knew right away within 10 minutes of being there that I had made the right decision. So that's where I was in my process in relationships. My patterns were just not working for me anymore.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that, I know when we did an interview, you were talking about particularly, like, is there anything in particular that you took away? Because we do have, like, the module 5 is conscious relationships and sacred sexuality, or any particular specifics on the emotional patterns or the things, a tool that you learned that helped you in relationships?
2 things. Well, 3 things actually. One, I say all the time to people that if it wasn't for yoga psychology, I wouldn't still be in my relationship. So let's just say that first.
Sonia says that all the time too.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true. We gotta
get Sonia back on here because she says the same thing. She's like, I would not be with him right now if I did not do Yoga.Psyche.Soul.
Yeah, she and I have talked about that. So yeah, we'll have to get on
we can have a triple show.
Yeah. And then secondly, with the relationship module, I definitely learned a lot about that in that module, about being in service and thinking about how can I really be in service of that other person and be conscious of what that person needs and be supportive of what that person needs in a relationship, and just really live a conscious relationship. Which is different from, I think, what a lot of us do in relationships. Naturally, as a human, as we go in like, well, this person's not meeting my needs, or, subconsciously you're like, what can this person do for me? Right. It's switching that and really thinking about the other person first. And like what you talk about, what you call Christ consciousness, is like just trying to live and serve that other person, even when it may not feel good to do that, right? You're shifting the mindset to be compassionate and really understand the other person's side. So that piece of it and the conscious communication was huge. And then the last thing for me personally, as far as the samskara, was around communication, and it was around like emotional regulation and the way I expressed how I was feeling. And sometimes it might have been with anger, like beyond it being not raging, but just beyond where it was to be in a healthy space to have a productive conversation, right? And so that was the shadow work that I had to do to turn that around, so that when I was in a relationship, whether it's at work or especially personal, I wasn't triggered enough. I wasn't triggered anymore that I could step back, but it was just a lot of shadow work I had to do to change that pattern. And I'm happy to say it, I don't have it anymore. Like all the work that we've done, and then all the work that you have us do when we're at home with our own sadhana practice, has rewired that pattern. And so the other piece of it was like, I had an argument, part of it was part of that pattern. And I don't have it anymore. I don't have that desire to do that. So that has made a huge difference in my life across the board, not just in my personal relationship, but across all relationships. So I'd say that's one of the biggest takeaways for me.
I was so happy when I heard you, we were talking about this when you were here in the fall, just rewiring a big emotional pattern like anger, like a very reactionary anger response, which is damaging to relationships, which sabotages relationships. And oftentimes we inherit that. We learn these very unconscious behaviors. We see it modeled in front of us as children. It's maybe several generations, many generations old, embedded in just our observation of how relationships work. And so I really commend, and I want to acknowledge you going in and doing that deep inner work to uproot that and say, this is sabotage other relationships. It's sabotaging the relationship I'm in right now. This is not working for me. And it's a discipline to change those patterns. So good for you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being such an amazing guide, and transformational guide is what you are. Just so thank you for all the work that you do to help us get to that point.
Thank you. And for some of you watching, in our module 1, which is Foundations of Yoga Psychology, we do specifically a specific exercise that I learned from my teacher, Mona Miller, which is called anger work. And I find that Mona would hammer this home with us so much, and every one of us resisted it and hated doing it. But I really learned that one of our greatest empowerments is to learn how to work with the energy of anger, because it's a great teacher. It shows us where our boundaries are. It's a part of us that's very necessary. But instead of reactionary and lashing out, we have to learn how to channel it. It doesn't mean that we don't express it. We have to express it. We have to move it out of our bodies, whether it's journaling, bashing, writing a letter, writing a fuck you letter, whatever it might be, different tools that we learn in that module 1 that then carry through. And most of us, I would say, I don't like to use platitudes, but most of us do have a lot of unprocessed emotion. I even see it myself, when something comes up and it's frustrating and you're angry about it, if you don't move it through your body, on level, there's residue. So anger work is something we're constantly doing. It's not like we just graduate out of it. Now we learned how to manage our anger. It's like anger still comes up. We're still going to get pissed off about things in life. How do we deal with that and transmute that energy and turn it into something productive? So we really cover that in module 1.
Yeah.
So for you as a teacher, what would you say, and a studio owner, by the way, which is amazing. And also I want to commend you for doing all this in like 5 years. That's insane. That's amazing. And a mother, also a mother.
Yes.
And what do you think has been the biggest takeaway or shift in your teaching and your business from this training, from doing this training?
I think the biggest shift actually is one, taking those yoga psychology skills and really implementing that into my business also, as far as with relationships as well. That's big, because especially in our business, relationships are so important. And then I think the other piece is just really being able to, like what you talk about, having your life as a curriculum, being able to integrate that in even more to really be able to practice what I preach. Like what I'm talking about in class is something that I've gone through myself. And I remember you saying this many times, that you can't teach others or take somebody through a journey that you've not gone through yourself. And that is probably the biggest takeaway, is, and being able to talk about, that patterns can change, and living a conscious relationship, or there's so many things that I could go into, but the biggest thing is like what you talk about, your life is your curriculum, and to give people inspiration that just because they have a pattern that's not working for them right now, doesn't mean that they can't change it. It all starts with the self-awareness.
Yeah. And I think that you make a really good point. It's interesting that we tend to compartmentalize and somehow think that business is separate, and it's like a nice and tidy sort of category of our life. But the truth is, I've coached and worked with so many CEOs of billion-dollar companies, the head of W. Rinker, Hollywood celebrities and executives, and everyone that I've asked, especially the CEOs, when I've said, what's your biggest challenge in your work? Every single one of them says the same thing. The people that I work with is my biggest challenge. And I can say the same thing about my business,
Yeah.
And so those people skills and that emotional regulation you talked about, and having conscious relationships all the way around, understanding how to work very skillfully with other people, it's really the name of the game. So everything comes through those relationships, and everything's built on our collaboration, our working together. So our work, our finances, they're not separate. Everything is relationship. And and our wholeness, our healing comes through shifting our relationship to other people, our relationship to ourselves, our relationship to life, to spirit, our relationship to what's happening right now. So I love that you bring that up.
Yeah. And it's,
go
ahead. No, go ahead. I was going to say, when you talk about, your relationship to yourself, I know that you talk a lot about transmuting energy and turning, lead into gold, and, turning your wounds into gold. And I think that's the biggest part, is the relationship that you start to change with yourself through this training, because it is such a major transformation because of the deep work that we do. So as our relationship changes with ourselves, it changes, of course, with everybody else around you, right? When you start to be able to come from that place of peace and change, then the things around you don't seem to affect you. You see the world differently, and it affects you differently, if that makes any sense.
You're really changing your lens, the lens that you're perceiving. So Lisa Marie is asking, what are some of she said, I love the connection between yoga and psychology, which is why Yoga.Psyche.Soul is so interesting to me. What are some of the psychology concepts that you learned that had the biggest impact on your teaching?
I would say the biggest one, outside of the relationships and the conscious relationships module that we talked about, is thinking about one, the samskara patterns and starting to understand the mindfulness and the neuroscience and how that thought, emotion, behavior pattern works. And again, you talk about this in the training about breaking the psyche, changing the pattern, working from the inside out with meditation and breath work, working from the outside in with asana, from the inside out with meditation and breath work, pranayama. But then the other piece too is just like understanding that through this shadow work, as I mentioned before, that you can change these patterns, and just really understanding that at a deeper level. And then just like you mentioned, being able to do that work and go deep, and that it can change.
Mhm.
So, and there was another piece. Tell me the question one more time. Something else
What
I
are
was
the
going to say.
psychology concepts that you learned that have had the biggest impact on your teaching?
Um, the main one is the samskara patterns.
Mhm.
Definitely, as far as something that we cover in foundations, and the mindfulness and meditation and neuroscience and kind of that module as well. And definitely conscious relationships and a little bit of sound therapy. But I'm throwing some stuff, throwing a lot out there.
It's a big, yeah, there's a lot of tools to choose from.
Yeah.
But I think what you mentioned, one thing that I want to highlight is what you said about we can only take others as far as we ourselves have gone. Once we get into the nitty gritty, and this is really based on shadow work, and we do have different moments where everyone will sort of be in the hot seat, and I work very specifically with people. Everyone that does the training fills out like a 10-page assessment. I'm pretty aware, really aware of what your stories are, what your wounds and traumas are, and I'm tracking each student throughout the course for the whole 6 months, so that at some point, probably more than just once, but at some point, the right moment will arise, or I will feel into when someone may be sitting on a trigger, and we will kind of open up the space and draw that person forward and really unwind and unpack what's happening for them. So there's a lot of deep, honestly, it's group therapy in the afternoons. And when we start to do this work, and it can be confronting for people initially, but what happens is we realize it's actually not so scary. That's a huge part of the training, is to normalize. We're all walking around with stuff that we're going through, we've gone through. And once we start to unpack some of these things, even very big trauma, sexual trauma, childhood abuse, not that it's always that intense, but it certainly is there for many people. We work with it, and we understand how to maneuver that energy, how to use the sadhana and the yogic practices to transform that energy, how to use the psychological tools to rewire, to reframe. And when it's not as scary for us as a group and as students, then it's not as scary for us as teachers to be sitting in the room, because whether you realize it or not, all of that material is in every room that you're teaching. And so once you have an awareness, doesn't mean you have to become a therapist, but how to at least hold the space for all of that and not be so afraid of it. It really helps you be able to hold a much greater, stronger container, more compassionate, less judgmental. That alone is healing for people when they know that they can start to explore these things, in their practice, in workshops or retreats with teachers. It's very healing. So again, it's not that you have to go out and become a therapist or start doing this kind of group therapy work in your own yoga room, but you're going to be much less afraid and be able to understand basic concepts of psychodynamics and how to work with material, and just have a working knowledge of mental health in the yoga room.
Yeah. And I think, Ashley, another thing to mention around the psychology piece is part of that shadow work is looking at your family of origin. So I think that was a big part for me to mention. Just, it's not about trying to place blame on your family. It's just really the self-discovery process of part of that shadow work to really look deeper and go, okay, how has this pattern in my family of origin affected my behavior and this samskara that I've created? And I think that's definitely an important psychology concept that lays the foundation, like
Yeah.
as your foundations module of really understanding and starting that transformation process, or a big part of it.
Yeah.
At least I found for myself, just based on my family of origin and looking at how that affected my patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to go and connect the dots. And so in module 1, which is in May, we do a whole family of origin, genogram assessment. And so that's a big assignment of that week. And it's interesting to me how many people, at 40, 50, never really connected all the dots and thought like, whoa, how did that affect me? Or how is that showing up right now? Or, just to have the support to be able to look deeply into these things, or maybe maybe you have looked deeply into those things, but look at it from a different lens, look at it from ancestral wounds or karmas, soul contracts, sacred contracts that we have with people, to reframe them in ways that, again, we're turning our wounds into wisdom. Whatever you're working with, it's okay. We're here to work with it and find ways to use that and make it productive in your life. So I love that you bring up the family of origin and ancestral wounds, because it is a huge tenet of Yoga.Psyche.Soul.
Yeah.
So any last, I just love to ask you one more question, and then anything else that you want to add. But how would you say this training is unique, or what's one thing, maybe activity or field trip or exercise that we did that was kind of a surprise and different that you liked?
I would say I'm going to say two things as far as the process. They both were part of the foundations. One was definitely the sweat lodge experience that we had the first week, and the way that you prepped us for that, like what you prepped us for in the yoga room around specific meditations, around specific asanas, pranayama work, and the afternoon work that we did that then prepared us to go into the sweat lodge. And so that was almost like, symbolically a rebirth, right? Symbolically going into that sweat lodge for me personally was about letting go of certain samskaras. And that was just another step in the transformation process to be able to let that go. And then the other piece, I think, was the anger work that we did as well. I thought that was amazing. And I think it made a difference in, of course, everybody's life that was in the training. Was a way to just connect with things that you didn't even realize were still there, that you thought you had let go of, that you thought, at least spiritually and emotionally, you felt like you had forgiven that person, but it was still somewhere lodged in your body or your mind, still there.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a couple things that really stand out as far as activities go. And just the fact that it's just so much personal development work that you bring us through. I mean, it's like having a personal coach or therapist or both, and you just have this amazing ability to innately know what somebody needs. And that's a gift. You have an amazing gift to be such a guide for each and every one of us, to give us what we need at that particular time. So that's something that, until the folks, hopefully everybody that's out there, that they'll have the opportunity to show up in the room and really see you when you're at your best, when you're doing the work and you're just there in the moment, and you're just doing what you do. So, because you have that intuition and that's, that spiritual gift, as a part of it too. And then you have the training and the psychotherapy training and that piece of it. So just take all these skills that you've been learning over 20 years and you just bring that into the room and you work your magic. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. So grateful to have you on here. So happy for all of your success. Can't wait to meet our new 2019 crew for Yoga.Psyche.Soul. And you were a great example, because you did. So again, you can sign up for the modules individually. And then again, once
Mm-hmm.
you complete all 6, you will be eligible for that Yoga Alliance $300 certification. Jennie has a family. She has a daughter. She lives on the East Coast. And so she did module 1, 3, and 5 in 2017, and then module 2, 4, and 6 in 2018. So that's a great way to do it too. The modules are back to back, Monday through Friday, and then you have the weekend off, and then the next module. So you can stay for those 2 weeks. But if it's too hard for you to stay away for 2 weeks, you just can do it as you wish. So that seemed like it was a good flow for you.
Yeah, it worked out. It was amazing. And it's funny how, you get what you need at the time. And so for me, it worked out really well over that longer time period to just really be able to immerse myself in it. So I'm sure the 6 months is definitely a great option as well. They're both wonderful options. But if someone has a family, like you said, or they're running a business, or it's just hard for them to get away for 2 weeks. And the other amazing part of it is that I have 2 Kulas now.
Yeah.
I have the 2017 Kula and I have the 2018 Kula, and that's amazing to have that both. I have 2 communities.
Yeah.
So that's what was meant for me for my journey. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I thought about that because every Kula Sangha has a little bit different personality and vibe. And so it's great that you were in both, and then you kind of bridge and weave in, the last year to the next year. And so,
Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. Everyone go to
Thank you.
wisemindfreebie.com and wisemindyoga.com. And Jennie, love you so much. Can't wait
love
to see
you.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you. Bye-bye.